podcast, we are going to recap our Columbus Hockey Coaches Summit from 2021. We got three presentations, one from Dan Dukart on transition hockey, another one followed from Dave Caruso talking about building the jungle and making sure that you are a goalie coach and providing a good environment for your goalies. And then lastly, we'll cover officiating and communication styles with them to best have a good relationship before, during, and after games. So really excited to bring these three. Highly suggest checking out our YouTube channel. Again, Hockey's Arsenal. That's 'S Arsenal, to make sure that you can check out our playlist and get all of the presentations from that summit. And then make sure to look out for the 2022 version. So nice little recap here. Chopped it up a little bit. If you've seen these in the past, this is a great little recap. Or you can just go straight and look at the whole entire video. So really excited to bring all these to you. This will be recap number one. Have fun.
All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Dan Dukart, for those of you who don't know me. I'm a local coach here in the Columbus area. I've been with CYDA Belfry for about 5 years, high school coaching, done some pre-posts, private lessons. I'm at the rink a lot. What I really want to talk about today is transition in the game, and basically how we as coaches can add to the existing framework of transition hockey. I think that all of us understand its place in the game, but maybe aren't sure the best ways to implement it. So that's really what I want to talk about. Just to make sure we're all on the same page here, I want to just define what transition is. Per dictionary.com, transition is the process or a period of changing from one state or condition to another. We all understand that hockey is obviously a dynamic sport. And so again, I just really want to dig into how this kind of impacts our game. So why is playing in transition important? Well, I did a little digging, and per a Hockey Graphs article from a few years ago, about 42% of all 5-on-5 goals were scored within 5 seconds of a zone entry. I think it's easy to conceptualize this if you think about odd man rushes, catching the defense, maybe in a bad change, etc. And so I kind of want to dive into this concept a little bit more. So from an offensive perspective, being a good transition team allows you to prevent a defense from establishing their structure and also create odd man rushes, while defensively the same holds true, right? So if you're a good defensive transition team, you're able to prevent the offensive team from basically creating high danger attacks against you. Okay, so we all understand, that on a high level, but then I got thinking about, okay, in the NHL, does it bear out that good transition teams are good teams? And inversely, is that true? Are bad transition teams bad teams? And this was from most of this past season. This is from JFresh on Twitter. And as you can see from this graphic, I think, without painting too fine a picture here, I think most of us would agree you'd rather be in that first column than the last column. In other words, the top teams in the league are consistently scoring at a higher percentage of their goals on the rush, especially when compared with, the basement dwelling teams. So this really had me thinking about, okay, what is it about these teams that allow them to be successful in transition? And we'll get to that in just a minute. This past spring, I was fortunate enough to coach alongside Dave Caruso, RJ Umberger, Lee Harris, Ryan Dopp, and I have a ton of respect for all those guys with the Columbus Chill pre-post team. It's a high school pre-post team. It was a camp, effectively. And some of you might be familiar with this from USA Hockey modules in the past. But this was a new concept to me, and Dave did a great job of introducing this, the 4 rules of hockey. So you can think of the 4 rules of hockey. Rule number 1, you're the puck carrier. Your goal is to create offense. Rule 2 is your team has the puck, you're on offense, but you're not necessarily the puck carrier, so you're in a support valve position. Role 3 would be the inverse, so defense on the puck. So you're the immediate player guarding the attacking player, and 4 would be a support role on the defensive side of the puck. Okay. And I really like that framework. I thought, it's an interesting way of teaching, and I think it made sense to a lot of our kids to think of hockey in one of these 4 roles. So like I said, this was a pre-post team. This camp was this spring, and it kind of ended up running up right against the playoffs, the NHL playoffs. And so I found myself, in this camp thinking about these 4 roles, and then also watching playoff hockey every night. And I was just thinking about how I could add to this, or how I could use it for my own coaching curriculum. And I kind of came up with my own version of this. And the reason I'm showing this slide is I think that one thing that I don't want to paint to, I don't want to overgeneralize here, but I think that coaches do a good job of segmenting different topics. For example, a coach will spend time focusing on defensive zone coverage, or a neutral zone breakout, or offensive zone possession type of plays. But if you think about it, so much of the game is played between pucks. Jack Han, who is a presenter later today, did some tracking and found that there's about 400 turnovers in a typical NHL game. So if we kind of dig into that, there's 400 instances where you might be role 1 or role 3, but that's very fluid. It's changing all the time. So this was my version, if you will, of the same type of roles. So if you think of role 1 as, you're a player on offense and your objective is to create a scoring chance. Well, a lot of times in a game, your team might have just gained possession. And at that very, finite moment, you are able to catch the defensive team in a spot that you might not have been able to otherwise. And you can create a high danger scoring chance, whereas you might not have been able to from a strictly offensive set. And then conversely, roles 3 and 4 would be going in, strictly in a defensive posture, and then role 4 would be transitioning from offensive to defensive transition. And again, it's the inverse. You're trying to prevent a high danger scoring chance. Okay. So I think, I've established why I think transition is important, but I really wanted to see, in the playoffs, if transition has as big an impact as, my hypothesis. And so I took a look at the Tampa Bay Lightning from this past playoffs. And in 4 rounds, they scored 75 goals, which is buku. That's crazy that they scored that many goals. And I immediately kind of started tracking and categorizing how these goals were scored. And it's a high number, but I'll try to explain here. So 30 goals were removed from the sample. They scored 23 power play goals, 3 empty net goals, 2 shorthanded goals, and 2 offensive zone faceoff plays that were scored like 1 second after a faceoff, basically. And a handful of the power play goals and all of the empty net goals were transition plays. But I really wanted to talk about the goals that happened in the course of play at 5-on-5 specifically. So that keeps you with 45 goals left in the sample, which, would I like the sample to be bigger? For sure. But, it kind of is what it is. It's enough that you can still do some damage. And what I found was that 31 of these 45 goals came off transitions. So that 69% number tracks with what the top teams in the league scored in transition this year. And just to put a fine point on it, I define transition here as either off of a turnover or from a defensive, like starting in the defensive zone, going through all the way up the ice into the offensive zone and scoring within 5 seconds of gaining the zone, like we talked about earlier on that 42%. So again, 69% of these goals came off transition. Okay, so this is all well and good, but how do we as coaches, make actionable, action here to really add to our coaching curriculum? So I pulled a few drills, concepts that I like, that I've used before, and I'm just going to kind of walk and talk through those quickly here. The first one is something that I stole from TJ Manisterski. He was the head coach at Division III Curry College. He's now the assistant coach at Union. He shared this last year, and happy to send a link to a video for anybody who's looking for it. Basically, this drill is a 1-on-2 that turns into a 2-on-1. So the puck carrier will be on the hash mark on the wall, and he'll skate up. So if you think about it from like a attacking posture, this is a forward in the defensive zone breaking out of the zone. The forward on the dot in the defensive zone is really like a back checking player. And so you can think of him as like a player who was on offense, the other team got the puck, and now he's tracking back. The red, the defenseman, is in an offensive posture. He's the offensive defenseman, and he's there as a support option. So the drill starts with the forward on the wall skating the puck out of the zone. The back checking forward will angle that player off, stick lift, and steal the puck. Okay. The defender is there again as like a defense valve. As soon as the puck changes possession, the two players that didn't have the puck become the attacking players against the other side's forward. So in other words, they turn up ice back the way they just came from, and it's a 2-on-1. I've done a few variations of this. I like to give a player, like, I don't necessarily love drills where the player with the puck is basically, he has no opportunity to do anything other than lose the puck. So we gave them a kind of a carrot, him or her, where they can skate, up to the red line, and if they have the puck still, they can turn back and make it 1-on-2. But we're really trying to prevent that. So in an optimum world, the two players without the puck are going to steal the puck and then turn back. The other change that I've made to this is, you can see at center ice here, there's like some sort of barrier or cones or tires or whatever, and the players have to go around that. And I think that's like a fine concept. But one thing that we've done as a variation to this drill is, if the defending players, the two players without the puck, are able to steal the puck before the blue line, then instead of pulling the puck out of the zone and then regrouping, let's just turn straight up ice and attack. So that way you don't, it's more game-like. You're not going to pull the puck out of the zone if you already have the puck in the zone, etc. So, but anyway, I think this is a great drill to just work on. We don't have the puck. That's defense away from the puck. We do have the puck. Now we're in attack mode. And then these two drills, again, these are just simple concepts. This 3-on-2, you can think of this as like everybody lines up as though it's an opening 5-on-5 face-off. You'll have coaches on the wall with pucks, and at the same time, they'll both dump pucks into each zone, one puck in each zone. And the goal here is for the defenders to retrieve the puck and make a quick up to their forwards as fast as possible. And ultimately, it's basically a race against time. And we're trying to 3-on-2 the other team before they can get set. I've seen this drill kind of go awry where a team struggles to get that retrieval, and it ends up being like a 2-on-0. And that's kind of the point. Like, we're trying to be quick here and transition. One thing I didn't write here, but you might add, is a forecheck, just to put a little bit pressure. I mean, the pressure in this drill isn't necessarily a forechecker, it's time. You can imagine a scenario in a game where there's like a line change and there might not be any actual pressure on you, but the pressure is the time that you have to get rid of the puck. The last drill or concept that I'll talk about here is a 3-on-3 in-zone game. I think, probably all of us have run small area games where it'll be a 3-on-3 or a 2-on-2, and someone will be rewarded. There'll be a defenseman who, the puck kicks off the goalie's pads, and all of a sudden they're Johnny on the spot and they get a goal, even though they were defending just a second ago. One way to mitigate that is to add some sort of play where they'll have to pass to back to their line, and that defenseman will be like an activating player. And I think that's a great idea. But this idea of a 3-on-3 for this concept is, you designate 3 players as forwards and 3 players as defensemen. And obviously forwards get a point for scoring a goal. And then the defensemen get a point for skating, or better yet, passing the puck through a set of tires. You can really position these wherever you want. I like to do it near the top of the zone. And the idea here is that the defending team, right after they get the puck via a turnover, their goal is to try to get the puck up as fast as possible. So you can put 2 tires or 2 sets of tires or whatever. You can move the tires throughout the zone to keep it from getting stale. But I think that's a great way to teach your defensemen how to play in transition. So I hope everybody was able to take something away from this, whether it was a drill or just a concept. If you have any questions or feedback, this is my contact info. I'm happy to get in touch, and thank you.
Okay, cool. So usually for everybody on Zoom, hi. I know you can't see my face. You could probably look up on Google my name if you want to see the face. Usually some pictures of me very young. I'm a little bit more stronger now, we'll say that. So, but thanks for having me, Greg. Really appreciate asking me to do this. So this is gonna be a quick hit, okay? So the statement up there is you are a goalie coach. So too many times we have coaches saying, hey, I don't do anything with the goalies. I don't know. They're a different species. But we want to make sure that here I want to give you some tools and ideas that you are a goalie coach. You coach goalies because they are one player of your team. So you got these goalies right here, okay? Grant Fuhr, Marty Brodeur, Dominic Hasek. Did these goalies solve problems, aka make saves, the same way? Absolutely not. Absolutely not, right? But what do they have in common? Lots of Stanley Cups and Vezina trophies, and arguably the best goalies ever to play. All 3 of them. And I could have put a couple different ones in there, but there are some things that they brought to the table. Athleticism, number 1. Play reading, the ability to solve problems within the situation. And what they brought is throughout their careers and growing up is they were athletes. They were athletes and they were able to read plays and make decisions off plays. So here's a quote. The guy is named Danny Newcomb. He's a Welsh field hockey coach. Our players will only be as good as the problems they interact with. So what does that mean to you? I'll give you 10 seconds to think about that. So our job as coaches, what we do, a big thing is we practice, right? We design practice. We build practices and drills with the ability, the focus to make kids better, right? And we want to put problems within the practices that they're going to solve for themselves. So I have a little analogy. I got this from Trevor Reagan. He's the Learner Lab. Okay, it's about the zoo tiger and the jungle tiger. The zoo tiger, okay, is a tiger that lives in the zoo. He gets his food taken care of. He gets his habitat. There's no predators or anybody challenges that he faces. Every day is the same, okay? The jungle tiger, a lot different, way different. Every day is different. He or she has to find food, find habitat to live, protect their young, protect others. You don't know what's coming up in the corner or coming up in the jungle. The zoo tiger is that easy coach that makes every drill and activity easy for them with a prescribed answer, okay? A solution that they know about. The jungle tiger, they don't know what's going on. Who do you think has learned more? Who learns more? Jungle tiger, right? Obviously. So there's been a couple scientific studies that they've done about wild versus domesticated rabbits. And the wild rabbits have more white matter or more bigger brains within their small heads. So that's one example. So there's another example about monkeys and the environment. The monkeys that were given like a set schedule, a set everything, they were very, they knew what was coming, had less, their brain sizes were smaller compared to the monkeys that were not. And there's one other scientific study about London cab drivers. So they did about equal amount of cab drivers to bus drivers. And they looked at how much of their hippocampus is helping with learning and all that. the London cab drivers that had to know different routes and go different ways had a bigger hippocampus than the bus drivers that did the same route. How does this make sense, or how does this relate to us goalies, right? If we are in an environment of a zoo tiger and we give them those answers, we are the bus drivers. They know what's coming, but they're not going to learn. And in the end, how did Grant Fuhr, Martin Brodeur, Dominic Hasek, they've learned from many different situations. So next. And what we want, and this is from a book, Nonlinear Pedagogy and Skill Acquisition, Chow, Davis, Button, Renshaw. And it talks about representative learning design, essentially making your practices and the activities representative of what they're going to see in the game. The jungle, right? We're gonna in the jungle. So it's a great book. Really will it goes a lot deeper. And what we want to think of ourselves as designers of the optimal learning environment, not transmitters of the information. So the learner does the doing. We want to design those environments, design the jungle in practice, so that when it comes to the game, us as coaches, they don't need us because they're going to be able to do it on their own. And they're going to be able to solve those problems. That's a quote by Joe Baker. Just want to give a shout. He's a research scientist from Canada, or the team up north is what we say with USA Hockey. So how do you design the jungle for your goalies? How do you design it? So there's a couple things, and you see the jungle tiger there, ready to stalk and take you down. So thinking about the jungle tiger, okay? The challenges they face. I got it, Greg. Click on the screen. Okay, there we go. Context matters. So putting your goalies in situations where it looks like the game, feels like a game, is the game, okay? It has to be challenging. They talk about the optimal challenge theory and having the right kind of hard. So you don't want something too easy, you don't want something too hard, but you want to try to find that the right hard. And that's a never-ending scale that you're trying to figure out, and it's dependent on your goalies or any of your athletes. And the thing is constant decision-making. Too many times us goalie coaches or the goalie coach world, they talk, you say, go to goalie world. They do 10 glove saves in a row. The goalie coach says, I'm going to give you 10 glove saves in a row. The goalies get really good at making 10 in a row. But how learning happens is not by having 10 in a row. You got to change your thinking is that being able to randomize. If you give the goalie less information and you still want to work on glove saves or whatever it is, the key is to don't tell the goalie you're going to do 10 glove saves or glove shots. You might shoot 8 of them there, or whoever, 8 of them, and work it out, but give them that opportunity to have to actually make a decision. Hey, I'm going to have to make a glove save. I'm going to have to make a blocker. That's it. So designing the environment, don't prescribe the solution. I know John talked earlier about prescribing the kind of the script, but you could prescribe we don't want to prescribe what the kids are doing to solve that solution. We want to let them do it on their own. So some things that you got to keep in mind, and I'm almost done here. Hopefully we get us back on track on the timing. Opponents, okay? So whether you are doing goalie specific, or you got quote unquote goalie time at one end, or you don't, or within your practice as a full coach, that opponent, what are they trying to do? Trying to score, right? Like that's the name of the game. All those 5 players are trying to score on the goalie. So you know what they're trying to do. So having that opponent in the game, we don't know how they're trying to score, right? But in practice, too many times we give these goalies the answer, hey, these players are going to come around the circle and they're going to shoot low on you. So you're giving them that solution. They already know what's going to happen. Next one is defenders. And this is one that you typically have goalie. You want me to admit him? Admit Trevor Frazier? Oh, he's got it? Okay, cool. Sorry, I'm very heavily involved in Zoom, so this all is. Defenders. So we know the opponents are trying to score, but too many times you have 5 players on your team that you have no clue what the forwards or defense are doing. And the ability for the goalies to read and understand what the players in front of them, their teammates are doing, is a constraint, is something that you have to try to make sure you have within your drills. So having that 2-on-0 flow drill, okay, hey, well, the goalies are getting a lot of shots. They're getting a lot of shots. Great, awesome, okay, cool. That doesn't even matter because in the game, we're gonna have defenders and we have to read what the defender is doing. If we have a defender put it on a 2-on-1, that defender might move over, defender might go out, and it's also the ability of co-adapting with your teammates and reading what they're doing. And there's, not to get too sciencey, but there's stuff about that co-adaption with your defenders and how you interrelate as a goalie with your defenders on essentially stopping pucks. So kind of like team systems, right? Like you got a system, but really it's a shared knowledge of what you want to try to do. And then the last thing is we want to make sure that we're realistic, okay? Being realistic within the game, within the practice environment. If you're doing 10 shots to the glove and you're telling them where those 10 shots are going, that is not very realistic of what they're going to see in the jungle. That is a zoo tiger right there. And the learning happens when that struggle is real. And in the end, you're managing confidence. And there's a time and a place, hey, we're going to do 10 glove saves because maybe a technical issue, maybe this is a pretty simple example, maybe their elbow, they're catching the puck behind their body, okay? But it's important for them to have that puck catching those pucks in front of their body. That might be the time that you're trying to fix that technical thing. But Grant Fuhr, Martin Brodeur, Dominic Hasek, their ability to read plays, read defenders, and be living in the jungle of the ability for them in practice and growing up, not just at the NHL, but if you look back at their life growing up, it was they had a lot of struggle. They had a lot of opportunities to live in that jungle in practices or where they were. So I got what I want you to do. You got about a minute, okay? I want you to write down on your piece of paper. If you're on Zoom, we're all watching you. We can see you with your cameras off. Greg has this like cool thing, so we know you're here. So I want you to write down one thing you're going to do to design the jungle for your athletes better. How are you going to change? So you got 1 minute. And thinking about how context matters, challenging and constant decision making for your athletes.
If these goalies are easy creases.
Easy creases, yeah, that would be a start. That might be the zoo tiger though. The easy crease. There's a story. So we're big on doing the crease for USA Hockey and making sure. And really, in the end, the thing that happens is when you, as a goalie, two things don't change in the game of hockey: the net size right now and the puck, and your ability to be on angle, be square, and have the correct depth is important. The easy crease does a good job with coaches of being able for you to communicate with your players of, hey, how is your depth? How is your angle? How is that? And that's the big thing with that. I know when I was coaching with the Ohio State team, the goalies didn't want the creases drawn because they wanted to feel the post coming out because they didn't care what the markings on the ice were. They cared about the crease behind or the net behind them. Okay, so hopefully you wrote down something. Hopefully you have some type of thought and maybe even just something that looks back to Trevor Reagan and his learning lab thing, but also looking at representative learning design by Chow. And that's going to really help you because in the end, you're designing the jungle for those goalies. And too many times we give it too easy for the goalies. Make it hard for them. Make it hard. It's not all fun and games when you're getting scored on in Russia. So we want those, like that's the jungle, right? That's what you're trying to lead up to. You're going to have 10,000 crazy Russians wanting to kill you. So you want to make sure that you are designing the jungle so they're prepared. So email, Twitter handle. Just want to try to get more likes or more follows than Dan here. That's just my goal. Any questions? What? Any questions? No?
What are your favorite elements, your favorite drills for goals? Obviously, small area games with USA Hockey probably a primary thing, but maybe getting away from small area games.
So everything is realistic. So a good quote that Jock Lemaire, I worked with the New Jersey Devils and played with them, and I asked Jock Lemaire, Stanley Cup winner, I was like, Jock, okay, how do you design practice? This is 10 years ago. How do you design practice? I'm ready for like something like this is it. This is what's going to happen. And he goes, Dave, we just work on stuff that we're not good at in games. That's it. We just design practices that we're not good at in games. So if you really dig deeper in there, it is true. He's designing the jungle for his players in a practice in the NHL. NHL is a little different than youth hockey, junior hockey, college hockey, all that, because they're more managing. They're at the elite of the elite. But anytime that we can design an activity that has opponents, defenders, and keeping it realistic, where you have one puck and you're trying to cover the puck and that ends the drill for the goalie, or the opponents are trying to score, or there's transition, because that transition piece is a big piece within there. So a lot of times in my practice, and Dan, I want to say that we do small area games. We do activities that are very game-like. And that's the biggest thing for them. And it might fit into if we're really not very good, or the goalies are not good at behind the net, we'll design something that starts plays behind the net more often than in front. So it's just about the activities that are realistic. The jungle, that looks like the jungle for our athletes.
Yeah, we don't want those tiger pain.
No, we don't want those zoo tigers there. Yeah.
So usually we have seen those statistics of how the goals are scored from the shooter's side. And do we have like a statistics for the goalies? Like, a normal goalie, the same rate is about like 90%. So most shots we are now not 10 nothing to go. So I just wondering what happened to those 90% of goals? Where they go? Go into the gloves or go into the rebound?
Oh, the rebound of how they're covered. I do not have that stat, but one of our goalie development coordinators in Arizona or something, his name is Hrabek. I can't think of it. Yeah, so he has done a study of where shots are taken and how goals were scored in the NHL for, I think, a full year. And it's a really great study. It's like a really cool, and it really talks about where the shots are taken and what situations are happening, and how it relates to the practices. And I think it was maybe my numbers might be off. It might be 7% of shots are unopposed in a game that got scored, like 7%. The rest are all opposed, meaning there's a defender or somebody on them or a play. So your typical breakaways or your flow drills that you do where you take the shot from the hash marks and you take a shot, only 7% of those are goals in a NHL hockey game. So a lot of them are breakaways, okay? But where the rebounds go, I think that would be a tougher thing to kind of figure out because it's a lot of data. But that'd be awesome to have something.
Yeah, because there's a lot of shots not going to go, and if you just do a heat map, you can figure out where this rebound is located.
Yeah, I would look up. Have you ever heard of him, Hrabek? I would definitely look at. He would be a really, really good one. He's done a presentation. I can connect you if you email me. I can connect you to Hrabek. He's done a couple presentations for us, and yeah. So if you want to share that online, that would be awesome too. He's really good, really smart guy.
All right, good morning, guys. Like you said, my name is Tyler Iffland. I am the Director of Development for Officials here in Columbus. In the back, we have Joe Hrabek. He is our Director of Officials for our local association. Both have a pretty good amount of experience in a wide variety of ages. So we've gotten to see a lot through the years. We work with a lot of younger guys now, trying to increase our youth officiating and their development, because there's definitely a large need in this country. So a couple of big things we're going to talk about today with communication between officials and coaches. It's a truly important thing to think about whenever you're in a game. So to start off, it always starts with introductions. And this is something that I always talk about with the officials as well. It's great to be able to talk about it from the coach's side. Whenever you're with your introductions, right? Good sense of humor. I know we want to work on the seriousness of the game. We've got a big thing coming up, but it never hurts to be able to have that little laugh with them, create a little bit of rapport. I'm not saying we have to stand there forever, but it's a good thing to do to kind of break the mold and be able to work together, because in the end, that's what we're trying to do. The other thing that I always talk about with our officials, and I think is good from a coach's perspective, is discussion about the game. Pretty excited here tonight. Some big things coming up. We're, anything like that. We've been working on our power play. Last night we played really well. We did this well. Something like that. It just gets everybody in the mindset of the game. And again, it just opens those lines of communication. The other thing that I always like to do when I'm discussing with coaches is I always like to talk about communication throughout the game. So if you've ever seen me officiate or Joe, we're always talking throughout the ice. I'm always talking to somebody, either players, my fellow officials. I talk all the time, so I have to kind of just tell me to shut up, which is fine. But I've always thought that there's never a bad thing in too much communication, where you'll be able to read when a coach wants to talk, when they don't want to talk. So when I'm introducing myself to a coach, and I would hope you guys as coaches would do the same thing, to say, hey, if I have a question, is it okay if I just call you over, something like that. It's really just going to help that aspect down the game when you're going to need to talk, to help everybody just make it smoother and questions getting answered easier. Does that make sense? By the way, if you guys have any questions, feel free to just stop and shout. Totally don't mind at all. Okay, so during the game, the biggest thing that I always like to talk about with communication, and then anytime I talk to coaches, like meetings like this as well, I always say the biggest thing would be questions, not accusations. So what did you see is always a great one to start off with. A lot of times coaches will always go back to, well, this is what I saw, which is fine. I totally understand. We've all got our opinions. And I always say that's understandable. The big thing I always like to emphasize is the difference in where we're standing, right? If I'm on the goal line and the bench is all the way back here, 200 feet away, then we may absolutely have seen something different. Okay, so then I'll always let the coaches get their opinion out, which is cool. But then I can always say that with the difference in our positioning or distance on the ice, we absolutely saw two different things. I called what I called, and we're going to move on, right? So that's another civil conversation that gives the coach the opportunity to understand what they were thinking. Let me ask you a quick question. How many times have you guys seen an official change their call? Have you? 0? Oh, I thought you were raising your hand. I was like, oh, I want to know who that is. That would be very interesting. So, yeah, I know that's the hard part. And I've been on the other side too. So I can 100% understand where all you want to do is have them change their call. But it's more than likely not going to happen. And the thing I always recommend to coaches is to save that rapport for down the line when you may need it more. That also comes into the fact regarding tone. We can absolutely have a very civil conversation. You can be upset with me and your tone can continue to increase, because I do it too when you're in the heat of battle. What it comes down to is getting your point across verbally, but not being verbally assaulting. Does that make sense? So if I'm going to say to Joe in a really, really upset tone, Joe, that was just the worst call I've ever seen. I'm not sure what was going on, right? I'm getting a little bit more mad. I'm a little bit more aggressive with him. Versus, Joe, come on, what are you doing? What did you see there, right? So there's that difference in understanding it and when to use it. If you're the aggressive tone all the time, do you think anybody's going to want to come over and talk to you? Because I certainly don't. I try to avoid that. Now, I'll try to lighten it up a little bit, but doesn't mean you have to have the soft tone all the time either, right? Again, we're in a competitive hockey game here. So if we're going to do both, then we have to be able to pick our times to do it, to create that community or to keep that communication and keep that rapport. That makes sense? The last thing I always like to say during the game is agree to disagree. It is okay to understand that we saw two different things as officials and coaches, because in the end, the official's job is to do what's best for the justice of the game. The coach's job is to do what's absolute best for their team. So when we don't come to a consensus, that's okay, because later on down the game, we probably will. All right, so after the game, I always like to just remind coaches when I'm talking, big thing is respect for the game. We could have officials that have done the worst job, but it's always good to keep in mind, respecting the game, respecting that officials are needed for our game that we love to continue. Being the bigger person, this is something I mentioned to the officials as well. If you know that you have had the worst game, or if a coach has just been extremely disrespectful or just really hard on you the whole game, doesn't matter. At the end, you still try to be respectful. You still shake hands, congratulations, or anything like that after the game. And then maintaining respect, both officials and coaches. We've all been in those situations. We've all seen those videos on YouTube where things get a little heated after the games. So keeping that respect that we've had throughout is always important from our side as well as the coach's side. All right, I know that was a lot. So does anyone have any questions? All right, so the next thing is continuing with communication, body language versus verbal language. These were two of my favorite pictures because it's something that I really emphasize when we do our local USA Hockey seminars for officials. So body language. Does anybody on the left feel like that is going to be a fun conversation from an official's perspective? Okay. And then on the right, does anybody feel like they would enjoy being the coach there just a little bit? Because I think that would be a little, you would just be getting everything out. You'd be like, this is great. I can tell you right now, the officials, number 29 is not having a good day. We've all been there. So the reason I bring this up, body language versus verbal language. When we are going to have, so whenever we talk to coaches and as officials, and whenever coaches are talking to officials, I always like to emphasize it's a two-way street as far as body language goes, right? I would not want an official coming up to you guys and standing like this, acting like they're bored. I wouldn't want them putting their hands on their hips like they're standoffish, right? So I always emphasize, hey, let's keep it nice and loose. Watch our facial language so that it doesn't appear like you're overly mad. And that way we can have that civil conversation. And then anytime that I always talk to coaches, I always say the same thing. So if I'm going to have our officials do that, we would have our coaches do the same thing in that, we don't want any pointing of fingers, right? We don't want any standing on the dashboard, standing on the bench, because it's looking like it's just a bad image looking over. So if we're going to have that conversation, I'm not saying we can't raise our voices or yell. I'm just saying let's keep that communication to the point where it doesn't get over the top looking bad. Does that make sense? It's really important. I always do this demonstration where when you stand over top the official, if I were to stand on this table and you stand over top the official and you're just pointing at him the whole time, the amount of different angles where it looks like it's the coach is just berating the official, it just looks terrible. That for the official loses credibility, and then the official is never going to want to come back and talk to the coaches. I'll give you a good example then of when he goes to talk to this coach. Okay, so when he goes to talk to this player right here. Okay, perfect. So obviously you can't hear it, but he's going to talk to this guy. And although you can't hear it, that looks like a very, very good conversation, right? A good example of body language. He's got his hand right on him, right? He's soft in nature. When you hear it too, his tone is very low. He's like, hey, I saw it, totally missed it. I got to get it next time. And it's just a very good conversation between the two that builds the game better. So then that'll move on to, 1 second, sorry, it's a little, right? He's putting it back on himself. Okay, so here's a good one too. So if you see in the beginning, he asks the coach who's standing there very upset because he just missed a very large trip in the corner that ended up in a goal. He says to the coach, I completely understand. I had my head turned, it's just me out there. I'm trying to work on my own, right? So the coach, he then says, hey, we can have a conversation about this. The coach completely changes his tone, right? He leans over, he's not trying to shout at him as much, and the conversation goes exponentially better. And he even mentioned how he built rapport with that coach, and the coach was willing to talk to him like that the rest of the game. So I know that was from an official's perspective, but those little things truly, truly make a difference from both sides. And that's why I try to emphasize the 50-50 streak, because we're just trying to do what's best for the game in that aspect. How do I go back? Oh, there we go. Okay. Enough about communication. I feel like I hit it pretty good. Sorry, I try not to be too much from the official side. Does anybody have any questions, examples, anything from communication that you want to ask or share? Do you feel like that was okay from our side, from coach's side?
How do you work with a referee that may be hard to work with?
Yeah, absolutely.
It tells you that, hey,
Yep.
you don't want to get into pissy matches stuff.
Yep, absolutely. That's great, because from an official side, I always try to deal with that, because that's a problem for us too, right? Things that I always recommend would be maintaining that conversation of, hey, I'm really trying to work with you here. Like, I have not done anything wrong. I just have some questions. The other thing you can always do is look at their partner, maybe speak to their partner, see if there's like something different going on, see like what you can do as far as like why it's just being that whole standoffish attitude. I mean, being real for a second, we all know there are some individuals who can just be like that naturally. Like, I'm not gonna lie. Like I've got guys that I can give the example of that, like, you know, you see it and you're like, oh, like that's just who they are, and that's a tough person to crack. Would you agree, Joe?
Yes. Yeah, I would say, because it's one of your points about the introduction before the game.
Yep.
And stuff and that.
Absolutely.
And the vast majority, that happens.
Yep.
But there are some folks that
Absolutely.
are just crusty, and you're like, who's going to be a good game?
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And I would say to that point, for youth hockey, I always, when I speak to our local coaches, I always encourage them to please reach out to us as the Officials Association. I'm not saying that's like a tattletale thing, but I'm not there. Like, I'm working other games at other rinks throughout the weekend. So I need to know what's going on. And if it's something that is as simple as that, that can be a conversation of, hey, this is just a simple fix, and this is what they're thinking the moment you come out on the ice. Like, when you just don't really have that true conversation, and it's really kind of changing their demeanor, or their willingness to like work with you. Does that make sense? Because I've absolutely had it too. I mean, I've worked with those partners. Like, I always go and just like, I'll say something to the coaches, like 30-second conversation. I always try to get them to laugh at something, right? And then we move on. And that just changes it. But I've had those partners too that are like, I'm not even going over there. It's like, well, why? You know? I don't know. Changes it a little bit. So do you have any advice for that, Joe? I'm still trying to crack that code.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode. I know I did. So before we let you go, though, we'd like to remind you to please like our podcast, subscribe to it, give us a follow, and share this with all the hockey people in your life. We really appreciate growing this community, this podcast. Remember, we also have a newsletter, the Hockey IQ newsletter as well. Really excited to continue to grow this. So please help us grow this further by liking, subscribing, following, and sharing with everyone. So appreciate you all. Take care.